we're here to talk about procurement strategies with a great panel here. Just as a reminder of the nuts and bolts of it, we'll certainly like to take questions from in the room and from people watching online as we go along. I might call for questions, but naturally when I forget, what I'll probably do is just look to the audience, at you guys, and if you catch my eye, put your hand up or wave at me or whatever, then at a suitable point we'll get a microphone to you. If you're watching this online, your questions are really welcome too. Use the chat function on the screen that I think you have there. They come directly to my iPad and I'll try and get those across as well. So look, without any further ado, I would like the panel to introduce themselves. And I need to apologise, Nicholas. Your mugshot is not up there on the roll of honour. So maybe you can kick off with introducing who you are, what you are, why you do it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So my name is Nicholas. I am with Lufthansa Group and in procurement, and I am heading the team that is responsible for the procurement strategy. We not only do the analysis and development of the strategy, but we also do some execution. So we have a lot of procurement excellence teams that are kind of in my team. We do a little bit of ESG, we do a little bit of claim management, negotiation excellence. So all of that also that's part of our philosophy, that we don't only do the fancy slides, but that we also execute. So this is my role, and I'm on behalf of Alan Gärtner here, who couldn't make it today, but I'm very excited, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, Rob Turner. I lead procurement and supply chain at Deliveroo. I've been with them for about 2.5 years and leading a fairly substantive transformation program, supporting our business to become viable, I would say profitable and viable. And it's a kind of culmination of about 25 years of procurement experience, off 5 years of operations management. So it's taken, I would say, a good 15 to 20 years to be able to do the sort of thing that we've tried to do pretty quickly at Deliveroo.
And one of the many rewards being on the front cover of Procurement magazine the other month. Isabella.
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Isabella Moise. I work for Simply Health. I've been with the company for 15, 16 months now. I look after IT procurement. What I do is pretty self-explanatory from the title. And yeah, I'm part of an organization that has been around for 150 years. So
cool.
Privileged. Andrew. Thank you for the invitation.
Hi, so I'm Andrew Roper. I head up procurement at Clyde & Co, where I've been with them for 3.5 years, building the firm's first global procurement function. For those of you who don't know Clyde & Co, it's a global law firm in 35 countries across 6 continents. So my role has been to build out that global procurement, moving it from a sort of decentralized, siloed model into a global function. Happy to be here.
Good morning. Tricia Miller. I am with Coupa. I recently joined Coupa and I have responsibility for product marketing and customer experience marketing with Coupa. But I come to that role with zero marketing experience and all procurement experience. So I spent 20 plus years digitizing the procurement function and was interim CPO for a couple of years before making this change. So bringing that perspective of you, the customers, to how Coupa is going to help you, the customers, understand the different tech capabilities and get real value from it. So very excited to be here today. Thank you.
So there we go. A few scars on a few backs through years of experience on this panel. And Coupa, of course, is sponsoring this panel. So thank you, Tricia, for that. And therefore, may I ask you to kick off? Can we have a look at how procurement strategies have changed over the past, say, 10 years or even 5 years, and how they've changed?
Great, thank you. I'm going to risk disagreement on this one, but I actually don't think effective procurement strategies have really changed much over the last 10 years. And what I mean by that is not that procurement as a function hasn't changed. I genuinely believe if you go back 5, 7, 10 years, the strategy of what good looked like was written. The change is that more people now understand it. Within procurement organizations, I think we as leaders very much understand what our mission is. Not just traditional procurement where we have to make sure things get bought and paid for, but the new procurement that we're all trying to operate. supplier relationship management, business partnering, closed loop spend management, sustainability agendas. And so I think the strategy was written. The beauty of the last 5-10 years is the strategy is being understood by procurement leaders and their teams, and finally being understood by organizational leaders as a whole. And they're now looking around their organizations going, what do I have when I think about my procurement function? What do I need? And how do we make that uplift to get procurement operating within inside the walls of the organization to do what it needs to do going forward?
And I'd echo, I agree with the procurement strategies themselves hasn't changed. I think what's changed is the elements that are considered within them. So it's no longer, sustainability is no longer around risk management, but general ESG buzzwords, it's now being built in as a core part of procurement strategies in terms of hitting net zero targets and carbon pricing. The strategies changed around the kind of pursuit of lean, long, brittle supply chains, all offshored, outsourced. So the fundamentals of what makes a good strategy is organisational fit and making sure it's supporting the organisation's objectives hasn't changed, but the elements you're considering in your strategies have changed significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with Tricia, but I also think that procurement has become a more strategic function than it was before. I've only been in the function for 7 years, so I can only look back 7 years. But what I've seen personally is that there's more procurement roles now than there were 7 years ago. 7 years ago, there was a focus on purchasing and buying, exactly as you said, that organizations made sure that they were buying and paying for the services. But what I've personally experienced is that relationships with suppliers and vendors are now more partnership oriented, as opposed to in the past when they were very transactional and everyone was coming by the book. I think now they're more flexible, adaptable, and ready to change even overnight if they have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I look back, I think procurement could have been accused of running a standard playbook for many years and just lifting and shifting the same playbook from one organisation to another. And so I do think strategies have changed, but on the basis of procurement leaders being that much more in tune with what the business needs and building the right hypotheses around value creation and management of risk and understanding how value is created in a business a lot better, rather than just taking that playbook that we used to learn and just applying the same thing by rote over and over. And I think that actually some of the ways technology is shifting is helping to change some of that.
Of course.
And that is accelerating at an extraordinary pace. I also think that there was a point of inflection some, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago when I look back, around how rules, regulations started to impact how a business operated and the things it needed to consider around data protection, information security, changes in volatility in economic environment, et cetera, which meant that the procurement organisations had to consider many other different things other than traditional cost out as a strategy.
Yeah.
And I think procurement functions of old were that much more insular in thinking about cost out when that wasn't necessarily what businesses needed at the time. So I think it has moved, and I think it's moved quite a lot on the basis of that. And I think particularly around the 2 or 3 organisations that I've worked for most recently, those are the things that have driven quite a different approach from those that I would have worked at, go back into the early 2000s.
And from Lufthansa's perspective?
I agree, actually, with most of what you've said. For me, the procurement strategy has not changed so much in the what. I think we're still trying to rake in savings. We're still trying to mitigate risks. We're still the ones handling the relationships to our suppliers. But I do think that in the how, it has changed dramatically. I think we have seen just so many different influences over the last years, particularly because of the fact that we are literally in crisis mode for over the last 3 years or even 5 years. So I think that's put a limelight on us as procurement. We in the organization are now the ones being looked at as crisis solver sometimes, I think. This becomes more and more integrated now into other functions, and that's why we are looking now, I think, in a completely different operating model at the Lufthansa as well, because it cannot be so rigid and stay according to the plan, but we actually have to be very, very agile in the way we execute the strategy.
So there's a few things that we need to draw out. You mentioned tech, Rob, but that's a whole big thing which we need to get to in this discussion. There's the whole piece about how procurement's tentacles now spread through businesses much more than ever before, which is great for career-wise. It'd be interesting to talk about how that's been happening in your companies and the difference you are making for companies in a way that you possibly weren't able to a few years ago. But I'd like to draw out some war stories from anybody about, we talked about the crisis, about changes to your approach in the past year or three that have been forced upon you, and that have either been successful or great learning opportunities. Who can pick up with a war story or two?
I can talk about how procurement has changed within the context of the organisation's financial performance. So for the first 3 years of our kind of procurement journey at Clyde & Co, growing very rapidly via acquisition, and procurement was around speed, quality, ensuring to kind of integrating businesses we require as quickly as possible, maintaining that growth trajectory. Then when financial performance deteriorated fairly significantly, still profitable but fairly significantly, that's when it did actually revert to the traditional procurement cost out optimized. And it was like going back in time. All of a sudden we're doing zero baseline budgeting, reviewing 90% of our spend over 6 weeks for cost out. So it was like sort of back to the future again, gone from value adding strategic to backwards to just pure cost out. And it was interesting that it was that brought procurement back front of mind for the CEO. It wasn't the value added, the integration of mergers, it was the cost out play that when CEOs and CFOs think about procurement, that's really when they think about procurement quite often.
Yeah, where I've tried to position it, because at the end of the day, we will always have to do the old procurement, right? We're always going to have to do those transactions and cost out as we look to deliver the new and the value add services. The key is not to make it one or the other, right? Because when we try and make it one or the other, we feel like some of what they want us for, we don't want to do. We have to be able to do all, both what we're known for and what we see as the value. And again, more and more leaders also see as the value procurement can bring. And so it's got to be, yes, cost out is a priority, but if we have to move to renewable energy sources as a balance, it's almost a weighing of these different components that influence our decisions. And it can't ever be as linear as it might have been in the past. It has to be holistic. One of the things we've talked about in my previous role was third-party risk management, and when that's important versus sustainability versus cost versus, and for me it's really about a third-party holistic view. What's the value that a third party brings overall? Are they a partner? What's their risk score? What's their sustainability score? Because it's across those collective things that should drive that influence on whether they're the right partner for you right now or in the future. And it's hard to bring those things together, but it's about driving the data to put all of those views in front of your leaders so that they understand the impacts of one decision versus another. It's got to be a holistic view where we can, if we're going to be successful going forward.
Sorry, Rob, we don't pitch.
No, I was going to say, because actually for me, it's been a little bit less of that and more about the people that we've been working with. So, I work in an organisation that is only 13 years old and has grown prolifically, and it is, procurement existed for about 5 or 6 or so of those years. The latter 2.5, we've literally lifted up what was there before and completely rebuilt it under a different requirement, but the pace that we've had to move at has been challenged, I think, by the fact that we have had to work with people that have built that business. So having to work really, really quickly in a function that wasn't particularly established, and change very senior stakeholders' minds about things that they have built and hold an emotional attachment to as a consequence, I think have been some of the areas that have been particular learnings for me and for all of my team. Because in previous roles, we would have that mandate. We would be able to go and have those sorts of conversations relatively easily. But here, in some instances, we're saying, that thing you built, we think you built it wrong, and you put too much cost in, and you got too many people there, and you made it too complicated. We want to change it to drive better value, better cost. So I think actually that is a big learn for us. I think in a young company, young people that built it haven't got that much experience in operating in many other listed businesses and what the requirements are around that, and then you're going to tell them that what they've built, you want to rip it up and rebuild it.
Takes a bit of courage.
So that is a real test, I think, and a real learning for folk.
Which is an example, isn't it, if it were needed, of how procurement is increasingly playing a much wider part in business. And I did want to pick on you, Rob, forgive me, because you were the pin-up boy for September Procurement magazine. And you talked very much about the transformation in procurement that you led within Deliveroo.
Yeah.
Are you able to talk more about what was wrong, what needed fixing, and how you fixed it? And then perhaps the panel might have similar scars.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly familiar story in many respects. A business that was burning cash at an inordinate rate, that hadn't turned a profit, had made commitments to investors on what when we IPO'd around what sort of profitability what they should expect over a kind of 5 to 6 year period, and we were kind of 2 years behind. And so we were coming under an inordinate amount of pressure on that. I mean, when I joined, the share price from when we IPO'd in early 2021, which was kind of £3.50, was about 89p. So that kind of gives a bit of a sense of where investors were thinking about things. So there is a bit of a burning platform in there. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on in the day. But the procurement was, I would say, the place where people went to go and get their contracts administered through. There was sourcing going on, but it wasn't really sort of in partnership. Processes and systems were kind of badly designed, I would say. It's no disrespect to people who might have been part of that earlier on, but they weren't fit for purpose to work really agilely across a business. And so the business just didn't engage with procurement very well at all. It engaged because it had to, and we made life really, really hard for people to do that. And so all of that needed to change. We had to change all the processes, all the systems, to try and make that a lot more easy to engage, and drive a fairly substantial cost out program fairly rapidly. So in the first instance, the first few months and first half a year were really about trying to instill some trust. There was virtually nobody in the procurement function at that point. It pretty much all out. Solving a few problems, instilling some trust in a few key stakeholders that can go sing some praises, and start to earn the right to be around some of those decision areas, and then the ability to take the business case to really create the change, invest in change, and have to do the whole thing all at the same time. Change all the processes, all the operating model, all the systems, because if you don't do that at the same time as running the cost out piece, then actually when you start to move into a more BAU and more value add from that space, you haven't got the ability to sustain that delivery. So you've got to be able to have everything else built so that it holds and sustains the value that you're taking out. So that's kind of the change program that we have run.
Anybody want to come to Rob's rescue and relieve him of the burden now? Has that got echoes within your companies?
I would just like to add that transformations are tough, very, very, very tough. And we come from a different angle. Actually, we at the Lufthansa Group were used to having 17 different procurement organizations across the group. Yeah, so many different airlines, whether that is Lufthansa, Swiss, Austrian, etc., but also some other business models. For example, Lufthansa Technik, completely different story there. All were operating in their own procurement operating model. And then bringing that, or making the decision to centralize all of that, bringing these organizations together, that first of all was a very bold move, because you can imagine the same that Rob has said. It is different processes, it's different governance, it's different IT solutions, it's different mindsets. So the thing that we hinted at, the people that we actually have to also bring behind the strategy, that was the foundation that we had to lay to even begin drafting a strategy and to even begin executing that. And for that, I can say it is very, very important to have a very clear view of what you want to achieve, but to also have the mandate from your stakeholders in the company that they see the value, and you sort of have to kind of promote that every day you go around in the organization. And even though you have probably 15,000 setbacks on the way, you sort of have to continue that way. When you start the journey, it's very important from my point of view that you celebrate your small successes and then go on. But it was very, very much necessary to generate that value, because we were very, very poor at generating that. And also, you have to imagine 17 business units potentially talking to the same suppliers, getting different prices, getting not the best prices actually on the market. There was only one reason why we had to change that.
And this is where systems come in handy, right? Where you have 17 different organizations that individually, I guess, collect data, but then you don't have a pool of data for others to go and find out that the first organization speaking to supplier X actually got a better pricing than us. I think the beauty of working at a small, medium-sized organization is that transformation is quick and can happen fast and can happen without necessarily using a shiny product that takes ages to implement and train other people on. And at Simply Health, in a world where a lot of people are afraid of AI taking their jobs and adding more value than what they do in their day-to-day job, we've actually decided to empower our small procurement team to go away and make changes to the system that we use day-to-day by themselves, whilst not adding pressure to our internal IT function that has more important things to do that are customer facing and at the end of the day bring in revenue. So we've put on some of our team into Atlassian training, and they now know how to model and change the workflows in Atlassian. And we use that on a day-to-day basis to ensure that everyone can adapt to changes in policy, to changes in, I don't know, GDPR regulations that would entail more scrutiny from our data protection team or info security team, and so forth. So yeah, going back to what my colleague said, I think there's beauty in working for larger organizations, but there's, cons to that as well when it comes to transformations that can be very hard and tough and can take a very long time.
I hope you'll forgive me if we push forward to one of the subjects which was raised earlier that we must cover, because I've looked at my clock and we've got about 10 or 15 minutes left, which is frightening, which is tech. Obviously, we can't have a discussion panel like this without mentioning AI and platforms. What is emerging? Obviously, AI, agentic AI. How is that changing your approaches and your strategies? Vicky, I wonder if you...
Yeah,
Tricia, sorry.
I'll jump in. I do have a session, a panel, or a presentation later on AI and
yes,
how it's enabling humans, because you mentioned it taking procurements or people's jobs. I mean, it'll change the jobs, but I would love to meet the procurement organization. If anybody thinks that they have a procurement organization that's so large right now that it will be, some of those roles will be eliminated. The work might be, but generally procurement functions are not large enough to be written out by AI or tech. That being said, the technology is absolutely essential, right? And again, I was very fortunate in my role. I was internally in Accenture, and so 10 years ago, the strategy was written, and we were getting the investment. As you know, the scale of Accenture understood very early on the value of the procurement function. We were getting the investment to drive that transformation, and so we were looking at tech implementation up and down the up and down the capabilities, really for a few key reasons. You had to standardize and simplify it, because you can't be known as a function that is difficult to consume or difficult to use. If you want to add value, if you want to talk about supplier relationship management or business partner, you can't be known for the fact that we couldn't get a headset 2 weeks ago. So we were standardizing and simplifying to take friction out of the process, to take FTEs out of that process, to invest in the new, because you had to be able to move the people from the traditional focus into the new value add focus. And then last but not least, to get data. You were digitizing, standardize, simplify, and automate to take friction, people, and produce data so that you could do all of those things that we've all been so excited about to talk about, the things that we all really want to do. And tech at this point is table stakes. AI is next iteration, where it's already happening and agentic on it, but all of it will just make the function more powerful and stronger. It will disrupt how and what we do, but it won't disrupt the workforce overall, because we still need so many procurement people to be successful.
Thoughts?
Well, I agree. I agree entirely. I'm not going to dispute any of that at all. I mean, I think the reality is that the agility needed around thinking what you're doing with technology right now is really high, because, you know, I mean, we've put a platform in Cooper's platform end to end, and we did it super quick. Risk of doing it any longer than a year that we took to do it, and you're dealing with a different product from what you started out buying, and if we can't move quickly and think about how we're driving the adoption so that it is fast, it is solving the right problems, then we're challenged in how we're supporting a business who are building business cases to invest in technology that by the time they get to sign the business case off and the requirements and launch, the product that they were thinking of buying has changed. And that's how fast things are moving at the moment. So we've got to adapt ourselves the way we adopt technology in a way that it can move at that kind of pace and be that kind of agile, that we can build basic platform data flows that talk to each other, single point of entry, but then start sleeving in the bits of tech and the bits of AI-enabled tech that help enable all other parts of the business and take away some of the manual administration work. So, yeah, I mean, totally in agreement.
We had a question come in from somebody watching online, thank you for that, which speaks to that in a tangential way. Who's best placed to kick off the consideration of AI tools and to lead the pilot?
For what? For business adopted AI or for procurement AI?
Procurement AI, I suppose.
At Simply Health, we have an AI forum, and we have representatives for each function that needs to be part of that, who get together every month and review the risk and the opportunity that the specific AI-powered or enabled tool would bring, and that is the case for everything from procurement AI tools to, I don't know, facilities and cleaning AI tools, if they exist. So it could be a forum, I guess, and the person with the initiative could be anyone in the business. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone in procurement. It could be someone in another department that sees the opportunity to bring more efficiencies to the procurement function.
I'd say for procurement tech, it's us, but it's for us to understand what our business needs and to be doing the research and thinking through what is going to make the difference. and bringing those at the right time in the right sequence and developing and deploying those. I think that's on us, and to take the business with it and in the change management. But I think from my perspective, in terms of other AI, it sits with a cross-functional piece, but it sits with the tech team to really understand what the product is and the ability to trial, test, experiment. But it's up to us to help provide some of the to coordinate some of the risk management about how that's deployed and adopted, I would say, from a cost and from a broader risk domain perspective.
And what I'd add is, in terms of the generation of the actual use cases, we've devolved that to all different levels of the procurement department, so that we expect people to come up with their own use cases for what they do in their day-to-day role. How can they be using AI to streamline, to automate areas of their role? So we expect members of the team to come up and bring forth their ideas, which we then prioritise, add to the backlog and work through. And then we share, in an iterative way, we share what we've done so that to spark further and further ideas. So it's sort of democratically developed and democratically created, but we'll prioritise as a leadership team where we're going to invest our money and focus on.
I know this is straying off the point about procurement strategies, but it needs to be raised again. And Tricia, you raised this point about skills within the team. And are your teams comfortable that they have a future? Do they know what they're doing? Because I guess many of them don't know what AI is going to do to their role. And I wonder about what are the entry-level jobs these days. I mean, is that an issue in your company, Nicholas?
It's a big point, yeah. The role clarification, especially the future role of the buyer. Yeah, I think we have just actually, I can speak for my team because we've just done that job. We've just selected the responsibilities and rearranged them. And while we have been doing that, we are talking about the influence of AI and how that is basically changing every day. So here we're not at the point yet that our people are asking, how will this affect me? But we do see it at some points. For example, for operational procurement, there it's absolutely necessary to have a look at it, and you even have to think about the signals that you send out when you put something in the strategy and it says automation of operational activities. That already creates a kind of fear for some of the people listening to you when you present that they may be eradicated at some point. And this is a little bit the risk that I see. We're not at the point yet that it is a fear in the whole organization, but what we are trying to do is we're trying to enable them, train them, use a lot of that to basically become familiar. And we're not doing it so democratic, I would say. We have a specific team in mind that is basically developing or collecting all the use cases, going around and introducing them to the teams and helping them so that they can actually shift a lot of the workload that they are doing currently in procurement away from these transactional operational tasks into strategic tasks. And if you kind of transport a message that there's a value, then I think you can make everybody relax a little bit and see that this is actually helping. But fair point, yeah, it changes dramatically how we operate.
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly not a procurement-specific problem. If you're in a corporate function and you're not thinking about how you're bringing people on the journey right now, I think you run the risk that you're going to demotivate them, or honestly enable a function that will sabotage some of what you're trying to do with technology. And again, particularly in the procurement function where we just need every person that knows how to make it work, and we need to bring them up that curve. But it has to be done thoughtfully. Like that central group within your function that understands your business processes and every single thing that's coming in technology. You talked about how quickly tech is innovating and changing. That's a good thing. We pay for that, right? Coupa delivers major releases 3 times a year. If you're a customer, you pay for that. Having someone in your function understanding what that's going to do and how that's going to solve your business problem is critical. Having that partnership with IT so that they can support that level of agility is critical. And then last but not least, creating this view for this culture where people see it as an enabler that's going to make the function better and see themselves in the future. If their operational role is going away, what might they be able to do if they opt in to train in that way. But all of those things are going to be critical to procurement functions and corporate functions in general to really create the human plus machine that fundamentally will deliver the value we all aspire to.
Thank you. It's so important, I think, to talk about the people as well, isn't it? That's what your strategy is. We're running out of time. Is there any question from the room that needs to be asked? A gentleman over here, Kendra, would you mind just running the microphone at lightning speed?
It's a
The human equivalent of agentic AI running across the room with a microphone. Yes.
Hi, I had a question for Rob. Like your story about your company where the senior leaders sort of built the company up really resonates with me because it's very similar to the company I work for. So my question's about when you have that strategy, how do you get them to invest in it, and how do you get them to sort of trust you and leave you to do the strategy without sort of continually getting involved and trying to bring it back to the direction that they were trying to take it on that might not be successful, and that's why they sort of employed you to come in and implement that strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to say there's an amount of subtleties and an amount of nuance in some of that, but I mean, I think the critically comes down to earning trust, and in the first instance, it's little wins, and in our case, the early part of my time with Deliveroo was being really super clear on who were the influencers in the business, and where there were some unique problems that I could solve, and start to build some support from a wider stakeholder group that starts to. So when if you've got a particular party that is slightly more challenging, you've got case examples of where you've done this before within the business, and you can start to build those out. I think it's super important that you have a very clear hypothesis early on around what it is that you think needs to be done, and that you test that early on and make sure that the business is aligned to that and refine it until you've got a very clear story. The other thing is never, ever, in my experience, I've not been successful in whenever I've tried to impart a strategy on somebody by using the same language and the same conversation with every single stakeholder. Start from a position of what is your personal problem that you are trying to solve for your customer, and how can I help you? If you start from that position, you will get through the door in the very first instance and prove the value that you can bring. You do that and do it well, then you'll be invited back. That's the critical thing.
Anybody else got their strategy through the boss?
I think it comes down to the strategy needs to obviously reflect the organisational goals, and it needs to be responsive and agile to the goals. I think the key thing also is to make sure your strategy tells you what you won't do, because we all want to buy the best products for the best price, sustainably as quickly as possible, while protecting against commercial risk vulnerabilities. But you have to have some priority within those elements of your strategy, or else it's just generic words that sound good. So that's what we did, was we took our strategy, broke it down. What are the 10 things that the strategy actually tells us we're going to do? What's our order of preference? So when push comes to shove, are we going to prioritise vulnerability, we're going to prioritise sustainability, or we're going to prioritise cost? So we made that explicit amongst the team, so that when you're working with procurement at Clyde & Co, you know which of those things are going to be prioritised, and then those are then aligned with the organisation's priorities. So you get a different approach, but the same level of service and the same sort of intent from different members of the team.
Yeah, and I mean that essentially it can vary even by subcategory, right? The weighting might be different depending on who you're talking to. You talked about the so what when you're talking to, so and it was hit a few times, but it really does come back to agility, right? As a function, we need to be agile and adaptable because we're tied to the business priorities, and if we can't continue to figure out what that right alignment is and be adaptable to make shifts within how we operate, we're going to get left behind.
And finally, with a few minutes that we've got left, some more takeaways, please, for people watching. What's keeping you awake at night? What are the things that are making you change your strategic approach at the moment, or at least change what your teams are doing and how in the past year or whatever? What's the future that people out here can steal your ideas on?
If I may start, so for me it's, but this is a very specific problem that we have, the various touch points that we have to our suppliers and the question of how we speak with one voice and how we can bring everybody up to the same level of knowledge that is internally what is concerning me. So how do we bring everybody in the company to the same level of knowledge, but the same level of skill as well as the same kind of perspectives on our strategy? And this is, I think, a big problem that we have, especially Lufthansa, because we are dealing with so many different views.
Okay.
For me, it's the fact that we operate in a highly regulated industry. So every change in regulations comes with, at times, with an opportunity cost that has a high impact on agility, on financials, on who we can work with, and the amount of time we spend internally completing all that due diligence. So that, I think, to me, is the one thing that keeps me awake at night.
Rob, I hope you've done all the fiddling you need to, but go on.
No. We are a few days away from completion from an acquisition by DoorDash, which would have been impossible a year or so ago. That brings on an entirely new challenge because we now end up with a couple, 2, 3 procurement organisations of differing levels of maturity, with different systems, with different. So we still have to deliver for our entity, and we will continue to build incrementally the maturity levels and embed what we're doing. But we've now got to start thinking about how we layer in what does an integration plan across a much wider, much larger global organisation look like on top of that. So just as we think we're coming out of one period of complete chaos of working all hours and trying to get the sort of things done we did in the time, now we've got to start thinking about how we influence how that works across a much bigger organisation.
Not busy at Deliveroo then?
No.
No? And how about Glide & Co?
So for us, I mentioned it at the outset, but really it's around sustainability and carbon. We've set the most ambitious carbon reduction targets of any global law firm, and 2030 is not far away, so it's really around how do we use carbon pricing to influence supplier selection decisions and then reduce our Scope 3 footprint. So that's really the key focus. To give a plug, we're part of a pilot group on the Sustainable Procurement Pledge on carbon pricing. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, so that's a real focus for us, is how do we get it, if we're putting contracts in place now, these suppliers will still be with us at 2030, so how we're making sure carbon is a key impact on that decision, and we calibrate it right so it fits with the business values.
And yeah, mine's a little bit different considering the role shift, right? Now I'm part of marketing, but it is fundamentally how do we ensure that our customers understand what value the innovations we deliver is going to, or the innovations that we roll out are going to deliver. It's not about tools or solutions, it's about business problems and what we're doing. And I'm wholly invested in simplifying this message as much as possible so that when we're talking to procurement people, we're talking about what we should be making easier. And with that, I am going to take a second on it. Another shameless plug. The Coupa booth is running demos. There's the first demo running at 11:45, and I would ask you to challenge the team if we're not demoing in a way where we're saying, here's the business problems, because it fundamentally, as functions, procurement back to being understaffed, we just need help fixing things. Like, please make it easy to fix the problems that we're all dealing with every single day.
Brilliant. So on a Coupa stand, out the back.
Out on the Coupa stand, out the back, yeah.
Super. Panel, we've touched on so much and hardly touched on anything at all.
I know.
But we're out of time. Thank you so much for those insights. I hope that's been useful for you. I hope there's been takeaways from that. We're taking a bit of a coffee break. Hurrah. But at 12:10, we kick off with Zycus, beyond S2P intake to outcome with agentic AI. So there's a sort of flow in the conversation there. But panel, for now, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.